Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. President Biden officially backs a gas tax holiday. What does he say it will do, and what's its fate going forward amid skepticism from even his own allies? NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
As Americans suffer at the pump, President Biden is calling for suspending the federal gas tax.
Now, I fully understand that a gas tax holiday alone is not going to fix the problem, but it will provide families some immediate relief.
The federal tax is currently 18 cents a gallon, and Biden is asking lawmakers to pass a 3-month pause on it. He's also urging states to remove their own gas taxes while asking oil companies to pass their savings on to customers.
I call on the companies to pass this along, every penny of this 18 cents reduction to the consumers. There's no time now for profiteering.
But Biden's idea is unlikely to pass in Congress. Republicans widely oppose lifting the gas tax, with the Senate leader on Wednesday calling it
another ineffective stunt to mask the effects of Democrats' war on affordable American energy.
And others saying it won't solve the problem.
We have a supply problem that needs to be dealt with if you want to get prices down, so it doesn't deal with the problem.
And it has even faced blowback from Biden's own party.
The oil companies do not necessarily pass that on to the consumer.
In a Wednesday statement, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wrote, "We will see where the consensus lies on the tax break," without explicitly supporting it. That's adding to the skepticism she expressed back in March.
The pro is very showbiz. Okay, let's just do something, there it is. But it is not necessarily landing in the pocket of the consumer. It's taken out of the trust fund. We have to pay for that to return it.
The same question now being raised by other Democrats.
I've seen other states do this, where I don't think the data reflects that the consumers benefit.
Meanwhile, Biden said he's also looking into gas rebate cards, but that too faces an uncertain if not doomed fate in Congress amid concerns that it could worsen inflation. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell tells Congress today that the central bank's plan to raise interest rates could possibly lead to a recession.
Inflation has obviously surprised to the upside over the past year, and further surprises could be in store.
The Fed is making aggressive interest rate hikes to bring down inflation, but Powell admitted that such a plan won't solve high gas prices and high food prices. During a Senate hearing, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts cautioned that high interest rates could cause job losses.
You know what's worse than high inflation and low unemployment? It's high inflation and a recession with millions of people out of work.
Powell said while it's not the intended outcome, recession is certainly a possibility, but he expressed confidence that the U.S. economy will be able to ride it out. Record high gas prices are hitting Americans hard. The Biden administration calls this the Putin hike, while Republicans say this is because of President Biden's failed policies. Virginia Congressman Bob Good joined us and weighs in.
Congressman Bob Good, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me again.
Congressman, I want to ask you about the energy crisis that we're facing right now. Do you think this could have been preventable, and if so, how?
This is absolutely a reflection of President Biden's policies. He pledged to declare war on American energy to reduce fossil fuel production in this country. And so the rapid rise in prices of not only what we pay at the pump, but everything else is affected by this president's policies. Almost everything that's manufactured and made has petroleum industry products in it, how it's shipped, how we get it to market. Even online commerce from the chips, the computer chips that are used to provide online commerce is a direct reflection of the manufacturing of the energy industry.
We hear a lot about how energy right now is going up in price because of the war in Russia, things like. Is that actually the case?
No, it's not. Americans know that their gas prices have basically doubled before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is a direct reflection of this president's policies, where he has restricted American energy production. Frankly, he wants to force us off of fossil fuels. He wants to force Americans to buy high-priced electric vehicles. He wants to force Americans onto public transit. He wants to force them to ride their bikes to work and things like that. So this is them executing their plan on purpose.
I think a lot of the American people probably don't realize that a lot of renewable energy is actually subsidized by the government. Can you explain that to us?
Yes, absolutely. And electric vehicles are the greatest example of that. You've got these vehicles subsidized, and they still are costing an average of $60,000, which is out of reach for most Americans, especially with the Biden price hikes that are costing Americans about $500 a month above what they were paying even just a year ago for just everyday essentials. And while inflation may be only like 9% across the board, the essential items like groceries, housing, cars, fuel, and all is much, much higher than that.
Congressman Bob Good, thank you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
To break down this gun bill that's being finalized in the Senate, I sat down with Florida Congressman Greg Steube. In the interview, he also voices his concern over the influence the Chinese Communist Party has on American soil. Congressman Greg Steube, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to ask you about gun laws that are looking like things are shaping up in the Senate, bipartisan. You have over 10 potential Republican senators that have agreed to the framework for new gun laws. First of all, how do you think we got to this point? And more importantly, what is in these potential laws?
We got to this point as a country for a lot of different myriad of events and things that have happened over years. One, we have an epidemic of fatherless homes. There's statistic after statistic of rapists. 75% of them are without fathers. We have a real epidemic, and it's in the home here in our country, and that's what we should be focused on. And what we've done over the years is we've created these gun-free zones, and there's statistics that 98% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. It's not a surprise that people who want to kill a lot of people are going to go to a place where they know there's defenseless children, there's people without a firearm to be able to defend themselves, and there's things that we can do as a country, as a nation, as states, to be able to ensure that, especially at our schools, we have people that are properly trained, former current military, former current law enforcement, to be able to react quickly to these type of scenarios. Some states have allowed for that to happen, and what's interesting is in those states you don't see these type of mass shootings occur. But unfortunately, the Democrats want to go the other direction. They want to blame the tool that's being used to create the destruction and not the person actually doing the destruction. It's an attempt to take all of our firearms. Assault weapons bans are openly being discussed. Certain handgun bans have openly being discussed in the House. The bill that passed the House would ban certain magazine sizes, like that would stop the atrocities in some way, shape, or fashion. And so then it goes to the Senate, and the more offensive parts of the House bill have been removed. The upping of the age, the magazine bans, the assault weapons bans, none of that is in there. But you have things like the red flag laws. You have things that are a clear violation of our constitutional rights. The red flag laws, and I voted against the one that passed in Florida years ago, clearly violates your right under the Fourth Amendment to protection of illegal search and seizure by the government. Without a warrant, without a judge telling a law enforcement officer they can take your property, you have incidences where law enforcement officers, and in this bill that was originally passed by the Democrats in the House, they wanted counselors and teachers and family members to be able to have this ability to take your guns away. It's a very dangerous path to be going down, all in reaction to a shooting that could have been prevented by having somebody that was properly trained to react.
Congressman, you touched upon gun-free zones, and you also said if people were properly trained in Uvalde, it could have prevented it. We're seeing reports now that the officers were there, but they did not use their guns. If this is true, and yet we're seeing a big knee-jerk reaction to what happened there, it's almost like these laws are based on a false premise.
It's absolutely, and it's always how the Democrats use it. You know, the 30 people that were shot last weekend in Chicago, they don't care about that for some reason. They only care about using these mass shootings to be able to talk and have that narrative of, well, it's the gun's fault. We shouldn't have semi-automatic rifles. We shouldn't allow for what they call high-capacity magazines. We shouldn't allow all of these things. And they use these tragedies to try to accomplish a political goal. And their political goal is, and they're now talking more openly about it, is to take your guns away. They would love nothing more than to take every American's right to possess a firearm away from them, despite the fact that 99.97% of those between the age of 18 and 21 don't commit a murder, don't commit a violent crime with a handgun or a firearm. So they want the 99.97% to not be able to protect themselves while only taking the guns away from criminals. And you're never ever going to be able to prevent that. If somebody wants to commit a crime, especially murder, they can use a vehicle, they can use a pressure cooker like the Boston Bombers, they can use some other tool to accomplish their mission.
Congressman, just switching gears a little bit, there's reports coming out now that the CCP-backed groups, the Confucius Institutes that have infiltrated many of our universities throughout the country, are starting to pop up. They were being shut down at one point by the Trump administration, and they're just rebranding themselves. You have a bill that you've introduced called the Protecting Higher Education from Foreign Threats Act. Did you have China in mind when you wrote this bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I had China in mind when we wrote the bill because they've so infiltrated our higher education system in the United States. We've even seen incidences in Florida where professors have been compromised, where we've had research institutes like the Moffitt Cancer Center, where their higher executive level individuals were actually being paid to give research information on cancer research to the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a real issue that I think our country is facing that's not really being addressed.
What do you think is the solution to combat this?
Well, what we did in the bill was if any professors are receiving CCP funding, obviously they're, in my opinion, compromised because they're being paid by the Chinese Communist Party. If that's the case, then if the research institute or the higher education institute or the college would continue to employ them, they would lose federal funding. So obviously a good stick that we have at the federal level is the amount, the huge amount of funding that these colleges and universities receive. And that's really the only way you're going to get them to be compliant, is trying to take away the resources they get from the federal government. You could probably pass a bill mandating that you can't employ people that are also being paid by the Chinese Communist Party, and most of these, especially the Harvards and Yales of the world, would probably just ignore it. So tying it to something that is a stick to them losing their funding, I think is a very important aspect of the bill.
Congressman Greg Steube, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.